a deep dive. And one of the reasons why we're doing a deep dive in James is because you kind of go, it's only 5 books, 5 chapters. It's like not very long. You can read it pretty quickly, and you might have done that. I encourage you to do that. But James writes in a style that is actually quite proverbial. It's like the Proverbs. He uses what are called aphorisms. They're short, pithy sayings that encourage us and invite us to sit longer in it and to go deeper. And so we're going to go slowly, and it might feel too slowly at times. That's okay. But we're going to think about what James is saying to us and take our time going through this. Well, we've done the kids puzzle, we've done the youth puzzle, the adult puzzle. You ready? The adult puzzle is name the album cover for this band. Anyone know the band? Come on, most of you were alive in the 70s, weren't you? You're excused. Oh, who? Doors. Doors. Album? EP? Single? There we go. The Doors. Riders on the Storm. And what we are looking at today is James's version of Riders on the Storm. Just James is known as, because he is interested in justice, in righteousness, living well in every season of life. It's about this integrity as we are shaped. Maybe his album cover today looks more like this. There's a killer on the road. Because this is what he says. He says, count it all joy when you meet trials of various kinds. Count it all joy when you meet trials of various kinds. This is kind of like the title of the EP for James's little section that he's in. James, as we've said, is wisdom literature, is teaching about a wise way to go. A wise way for us to grow. And especially here amidst storms in life. How do we grow through the storms? James says, count it all joy when you meet trials of various kinds. This little book is written to what James says is to the 12 tribes of the dispersion, is what he calls it. These are Jewish refugees in other countries around Israel who have gone out because they needed to escape the persecution that was happening, or they were driven out of their country. And so as we read this and as we listen to this little book, we need to keep that in mind. If someone hears this as a person who themselves have been exiled from their own home, who are no longer living in their own home, have been pushed out with the challenges and the puzzles that these trials can pose, they listen to it in a different way, I would suggest, than those of us who listen to it in a place of comfort. Maybe we think of Hannah from last week, if you were here, who shared about his experience of being driven out of his home. The way that he listens to these words of James will be different to the way that we do if we are comfortable and have been comfortable here for a long time in Sydney. So we're going to need to remember that this is written to people who are persecuted because of their faith, who are marginalized because of their faith. And it's also written from, most likely, I believe, from the church in Jerusalem. And the church in Jerusalem is a church that is known for its poverty, actually. It's not a wealthy church. It's a church that's known for its poverty. So where James is starting is he's starting with the people that he's writing to from the people that he's writing from. In the trials of poverty and in the trials of marginalization and persecution. So while this may be the context for them, and this is what we want to keep in mind, what he says also applies to all different kinds of trials that we may be facing. I think that it does become universalized in the way that we can apply it for ourselves whatever challenge or puzzle that you face that poses as a threat to your trust in God, whatever it may be for you for today, we can think of his words for that. I wonder if you think about that. What are the trials that you might be facing at the moment? Are there things in your life where you go, this is actually really hard and I'm confused about it and I don't know really what to do about this thing? Maybe you think of trials that you've faced in the past and how you have processed those or are still processing those. These trials for us can be a whole range of different things. Maybe they're financial trials for you, like it was in Jerusalem. Maybe there is for you a sense of lack. Maybe you think, oh, well, I'm not poor like those people probably were poor. And yet there's still this strong sense of lack in you compared to other people. You still feel unable to make ends meet without huge amounts of pressure on you. Maybe there's other trials that you face, like there's vocational trials. There's questions about your work and your purpose and your calling and what you're doing in this life and what you're spending your time focusing on, where your attention, your energy and your time go to. There's vocational questions. Maybe there's trials in terms of your actual current situation. There's a difficult event that happens. There's a difficult situation in your life where you're like, this is just really hard and I don't know what to do about it. Maybe there are relational aspects of your life where there's a fallout with somebody. Maybe there's a challenging family situation. Maybe there are emotional things happening for you where you are unable to manage your own feelings. They feel too big for you. They feel out of control. You don't know what to do about them. It feels like a trial. It's a storm in you. Or maybe there's something physical that is happening. Some ailment in your body, maybe there's a sickness or a disease or something in your body that you cannot figure out that is a trial for you. Maybe there are multiple of these that are compounding in your life right now at the same time. James is saying, whatever trial you face, here's what I would suggest in terms of your approach. What helps in these trials to live wisely would be James's question. And here's James's, if we flip the cover of the album, here's track listing for Riders on the Storm. Verses 2-4, which we looked at last week, he says this is about the promise of maturing through these trials. This is the first thing that we think of. Secondly, which we'll look at today, he says wisdom is what you need in these trials, and the way you get wisdom is through prayer. And next week we'll look at this idea of trust and contentment. This is what will help you as you face trials of various kinds. So very quickly, we're just going to read through the first couple of verses that we looked at last week and then move into the main section, which is 5-8 today. James says, count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness. And let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. As we've thought about already, perfect and complete here is about wholeness. It's about maturity, you could say. I think this is primarily talking about our moral development in relationships, the way we develop morally as people, in our relationships with God and with other people. And what James is saying is that knowing that I can look through the testing, through the current difficult situation, to the impact that that can have on my own moral formation, enables me to press forward. It produces steadfastness. It produces this strength in me if I can face this trial well. I don't think that he's saying this is necessarily about embracing a trial as being good. He's not saying the thing you're facing is good. He's saying that God can use this thing for your good. Sometimes in a trial that we face, there can be a reframe. We just need to learn to look at it differently and understand it differently. But sometimes the trial remains horrible. Sometimes the thing that we are going through is simply wrong. Sometimes it is unjust. Sometimes it is even evil, the trial that we are part of. And James would say, even in that place, we can trust God to mature us through it by strengthening us in it. One thing to notice as we go through this is that James, when he talks about going through the trial, he's not actually talking about getting out of the trial. I think because he's writing from a place where he's not expecting the Jerusalem church to get out of poverty. He's not expecting the wider Jewish community around the diaspora to escape persecution or marginalization. He's saying, how do you live with this reality? So the second thing that he says here, and the thing we're going to spend our time looking at today, is this idea of wisdom and prayer. First, you can promise maturing through the trial. Secondly, this is what you need. If any of you lacks wisdom, let them ask God. And God gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given to them. This question of what James is saying here in terms of the trials and how wisdom works in that. On the one hand, is it that gaining wisdom empowers us to understand and endure the trials? Is it wisdom that we need in order to get through the trial? Or is wisdom the way that we become mature? And we do this even through trials. Does the wisdom empower us to get through the trial? Or is the wisdom the way that we become mature? I would say I think he's talking about both. The wisdom is the way that we face the trial, we get through it. And getting through that trial, because we have the wisdom, it makes us mature. For James, we're thinking about him, he becomes known as Just James, James the Just, because he cares about things being put right in this world, about justice, about righteousness, right living. And he would say that wisdom is this quality by which a person knows how to live rightly in relationship with God and with justice and kindness toward others. Wisdom, I believe James would say, is the most prized attribute as we face tests in this life. Wisdom is not primarily about intellectual understanding or even about insight, but wisdom becomes about being someone who participates in God's way of ordering the world. Wisdom includes understanding things. It includes insight into situations. But your understanding and your intellectual knowledge of a situation is for the purposes of living in right relationship. Wisdom always has this posture. So he's saying, like Solomon, ask for wisdom. But he would also say, be careful to learn from Solomon in the way that you live. Because what he says is, but let him ask in faith, with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. One who doubts when they're asking God for wisdom. He's got a few descriptions here. Like a wave of the sea that's driven and tossed by the wind. this picture of the ocean swell. It's kind of like out in the middle of the ocean. We're not thinking of the waves crashing. We're thinking about the way that the ocean is constantly moving up and down. It's never got the same texture. It's unpredictable because it's always responding and reacting to everything else around it. This is what the person who doubts is like, he's saying. He's saying that person shouldn't expect to receive anything from the Lord. This person's double-minded. Literally, it says double-souled. They can't make up their mind about where their trust lies. It's like this constantly going between these two things, so it's unpredictable what decision they're going to make. And he calls them unstable in all their ways. This word is used in Isaiah 54 in reference to this violent storm. So it's this picture of a raging sea. This is what the person who doubts as they ask God is like, a raging sea. It's clearly linked with anxiety. This person that James described as doubting becomes as chaotic as the trial around them. I think James is saying something like here, and I've highlighted this in those words. He says in verse 5, God gives generously to all, without reproach. And so what he says that we should do is to ask in faith without doubting. Saying something like, God gives to you freely when you ask him, without criticizing you, without reprimanding you, without doubting your intentions or your needs or your adequacy, or saying, why haven't you learned this yet? God doesn't do that to us, James is saying. He doesn't have higher expectations of you than where you currently are. He knows where you are. He gives to you without criticizing you. And so he's saying, reciprocate in relationship. Ask him without doubting him, without doubting his love for you, without doubting his goodness, without doubting his desire to be with you and help you in your situation. There's a kind of person that asks God for help in order to be taken out of the trial. There's another kind of person that seeks God in order to know God's way within the trial. And it's this second kind of person that James is urging us to become. And he says that we should ask with faith, ask with trust, with no doubting. I don't know how you hear that. You might think, how do I ask without doubting? But what if I do doubt when I'm asking? Well, maybe I better not ask unless I doubt when I ask. You think that? Or maybe you think, oh, I'm feeling doubtful of God, and so I won't ask today. I'll wait till I'm less doubtful. Or maybe you've heard, if you haven't received what you've asked for, you must have doubted. You not having enough faith is the problem here. I think that is very unhelpful teaching. That is a part of a lot of our church, not our church here, I hope, but a lot of the church more widely, that approaches faith as something you need to conjure up and have more of. I don't think that's what James is talking about here. This idea of doubt is linked with the double-mindedness that he mentions. It's a division in a person that brings about this very inconsistent attitude toward God. Paul uses this same word. So we're talking about Paul here, not James, but Paul uses this same word to describe Abraham. And he describes Abraham's faith with this word in terms of the way that he doesn't doubt. Here is a passage in Romans 4 talking about Abraham. He says, in hope, Abraham believed against hope that he should become the father of many nations, as he had been told, so shall your offspring be. This is the promise to Abraham from God. He did not weaken in faith when he considered his own body, which was as good as dead when he received this promise, since he was about 100 years old, or when he considered the barrenness of Sarah's womb, his wife. No unbelief made him waver. He didn't doubt concerning the promise of God, but he grew strong in his faith as he gave glory to God, fully convinced that God was able to do what he had promised. That is why his faith was counted to him as righteousness. And you go, yeah, we should follow Abraham's example, shouldn't we? You know the story of Abraham? God promised Abraham, the father of the Jewish faith, a great name, that he'd become a great nation. He'd have descendants as many as the stars in the sky. The thing is that Abraham didn't have any children at the time. He and his wife were both old. Paul says that Abraham didn't doubt. He didn't waver in unbelief regarding this promise of God. Yeah? If you know the story of Abraham, you go, really, Paul? He didn't doubt? Abraham didn't waver? Hang on. When Abraham was told that he was going to have a child in his old age, what was his response? Laughter. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. What was his wife's response? Laughter. This is stupid. This is crazy. This could never happen. But God has said it would happen. So he turns back to God and says, okay, if you say so, let's see it happen. But you know, it doesn't happen for quite some time. And as Abraham sees it not happening, and he wonders, is this promise ever going to come to pass? What does he decide to do? He decides, I'll make this happen myself. I'll have a child with my maidservant if my wife is barren. And so he has a child with his maidservant Hagar. He didn't doubt God? Okay. God says, that was a really stupid thing to do, Abraham. You have just caused a whole lot of issues for your family and for all these people, this child of yours. Like, you idiot. I have told you this thing. Trust me. And Abraham comes and says, oh, okay. That's pretty stupid, wasn't it? Okay, I'll turn back to you. And so Abraham goes on, and twice he's in tricky situations with his wife there. And he says twice, no, she's not my wife. She's my sister. I don't want her to get harmed here. I don't want her to be taken from me. She's not my wife, she's my sister. He trusted God, did he, with this promise? He didn't doubt or waver. Of course, Paul knows Abraham's story as he says this. The point is not that Abraham didn't wrestle. It's not that he didn't make mistakes along the way. It wasn't that he was massively unwise or fearful. That had huge consequences for him and his family. The point is that over many, many years, he displayed a consistency in turning back to God, in trust, despite his trials and temptations along the way. He constantly goes, my compass is off. I turn back to God. I'm an idiot. I made a stupid mistake. I turn back to God. I am so confused. I don't know what's happening here. I don't know how this is going to come about, but God said this to me. So I'll turn back to him. One person experiences trials and says, this is too hard for me. Why is God allowing me to suffer like this? I actually don't think I can trust him. Another says, this is too hard for me. I can never be okay unless I get out of this place. Why is God allowing me to suffer like this? If he won't fix it, I will. Well, Abraham's definitely in that category at times. But it was over many, many years that Abraham consistently turned to God that he grew in trust. He actually didn't avoid doubt or mistakes, but he never abandoned God's promise. This is the kind of life that I think can be shaped, kind of life that over years allows God to point out things that are off, that are not integrated, that are not trusting, that are not whole, that are not moving toward wisdom and maturity. For James, I think the way a person matures, and this is where Abraham eventually gets to, is that they say, this thing that I'm in is too hard for me. It's confusing. I don't know how to do it. And so I'll face this trial and I will ask God for help and I will learn whatever it is I can through it. And I don't know what that is yet, but I'll trust him to teach me. Abraham became the kind of person who eventually trusted this long-promised son, Isaac, back to God. Paul's point in Romans 4 isn't that Abraham's faith was flawless. I think the point is that it persevered. It became steadfast. Continue to turn back to God in trust. James's point is not pretending to be joyful when things are actually rubbish, when we face trials, or making sure that you're full of faith when you're asking God for wisdom, because otherwise he might not give it to you. But what he is doing is he's warning us about becoming someone who asks God for wisdom on the one hand, while at the same time deciding that actually we can't trust God. James says, if you lack wisdom in the trial you face, and you know that you lack wisdom, ask God and trust that he will help you in it. Question for me then is, why don't we ask? Why don't we ask? What stops us from asking this way, of turning back to God when we face trials? One big reason, I think, and this is just a thought that I've been kind of thinking through, is it might be because you've had interactions that have taught you not to ask. If you have asked for things in your life as a person and you have negative responses when you ask, anyone had negative responses when they've asked for things in life? Maybe you've asked a question before and you've been told off for asking the question. Or maybe you've been belittled because of the question you asked. Maybe you've been rejected when you asked the question. It's a bit like the orphan Oliver, who's hungry. You know the story of Oliver? And he's hungry and he asks for more food after he's had his bowl. More, sir? I want some more, please. You want more? What happens as you learn to express your need or your desire? If you get a negative response, you learn, oh, I can't ask for that. Because your experience of expressing need labels you as entitled or selfish or needy or incompetent. This happens in our own families, doesn't it, with our parents? Or it happens at school, or it happens at work. It also happens in churches. God forbid Christians wouldn't be perfect. I was once at a Christian conference, probably about 15 years ago, I'd say now. Tim Keller was the main speaker at this conference. And at the end, there's this Q&A session. And you can either raise your hand, and there's a big auditorium, there's probably 1,000 people there. You can either raise your hand for a question or you can text the question in. So I've been here for the last few days listening to what Tim says, and he's a brilliant teacher, an incredible mind. And I've just a question that's been brewing over the days, and so I'm like, pretty nervous to raise my hand in front of people. And so I just think, I'll text my question into the text line. And the leader facilitating the question and answer time, he's getting the questions. I don't know if there's a mediator that's sending the questions through or if he just gets it on his device. He reads it out, and he reads this question out, reads out what the question is, turns to Tim and says, "Well, that's a stupid question." I was like, oh, I have been thinking about this over the last few days. Tim Keller was much more gracious in his response than this man, but I felt completely belittled when that church leader did this in front of an auditorium of 1,000 people. I thought, I'm so thankful that he doesn't have my number and that I didn't put up my hand to ask the question, because then everyone would know who the stupid person is, wouldn't they? I suspect that we all have times in our lives when we have felt ridiculed or belittled or ashamed for asking. And my question is, what about when it comes to God? What about when it comes to asking God what you need help with, what you desire? Does your experience from other people, the negative experiences you've had, get projected as you go, but I can't ask, I don't think I can ask that, I might get it wrong. God probably won't give me what I'm asking for. I'm probably asking the wrong thing here. No, I better not say it, because that's an awful feeling of being told you're wrong. James is saying God doesn't do that. He doesn't belittle you. He doesn't criticize you. He doesn't judge you. You know what? He knows what you need. He might not give you exactly what you ask for. That's not the point of this. But he will give you what you need in order to grow and mature through this as you seek him. So why would we ask? Why do we ask? Sometimes we do ask God for things as a kind of bargain. If you do this thing for me, God, I'll do something for you. If you rescue me from this situation, I will dedicate my life to you. You've heard these stories probably of people that do these things in desperate situations. I think James would say, oh, that's the one time of trust. What you need to do is cultivate a lifestyle of trust. What if he doesn't rescue you from this situation? Will you continue to turn to him in trust? Sometimes we ask God for things as a test of whether or not God is good. If you answer my prayer, I'll be convinced that you're good. I'll be convinced of your goodness. James's advice here is ask from a place of need. You're in a trial. Ask from your place of need. Trust God's character. The healthy ways to ask is to recognize what you're finding hard and trust that God knows more than you and will respond with wisdom. So what's the need that James is highlighting in the trial? This is one of the key things I want us to see from this passage. The key things that James says you need from the trial is not rescue. You don't necessarily need to get out of whatever you're in. It might feel too hard for you. It might be wrong. It might be unjust. It might be evil. But James is saying you don't necessarily need to get out of it. Your circumstance doesn't need to change in order for God to do work in you to mature you. What you need is what you lack, wisdom. How do I sit in this place in a healthy way? How do I let God shape my character in this place? How do I grow through this? How do I survive? What do I need around me in order to support me in this time? These are the types of things that you need wisdom for in order to be in the place where you are. You know, the thing is that over time that I hope God does rescue you from that place. This is one of the key themes of the whole scriptures, that is all about rescue. It usually happens much slower than we hope, though. And if you look through the scriptures, the rescue of God is over generations. I like what Scott McKnight says. He says, wise persons have learned by trusting God that God is trustworthy. The way that you learn that God is trustworthy is by trusting him. This is the way that you become wise, by trusting God and seeing that he's trustworthy. James is writing from a place of poverty, persecution to a marginalized people around the Roman Empire. Wisdom's about the kind of life you live within the trouble that you face. He doesn't expect circumstance to change. He doesn't expect persecution to stop. He expects followers of Jesus to learn a life that pursues justice and peace along properly moral lines without resorting to things that are not like Jesus. Violence, language that demeans, conflict within a community. These are the things you'll go on to talk about. And so asking for wisdom, really, if you think about it, is asking to learn to endure in the way that Jesus endured. Like Jesus, if you invite him into your situation with love and justice and peace, then you will learn to endure like Jesus. How did Jesus endure? Trusting God, continually turning to him when things felt too hard for him. And Jesus becomes our model, doesn't he? He becomes our savior. He becomes the one we look to, and he also becomes the one that is with us in our own trials. I don't know if anyone has been to San Frattuso in Italy. Anyone been to San Frattuso in Italy? It's just south of Comoli, just north of the Cinque Terre in Italy. Claire and I actually went to the beach at San Frattuso for our 10th wedding anniversary. Went over to Italy for a wedding, and some friends said, you got to go to Comoli and do this walk down to San Frattuso. And there's this beautiful Benedictine monastery on the hill there, and this beach is like one of the most stunning places I've ever been. About 300 meters off the shore, this statue sits on the bottom of the ocean floor. I didn't know it was there when I went there, so I'm going to go back there one day. But I love this picture. I love this statue. It's a statue of Christ that sits on the bottom of the ocean floor and reaches up. It's a picture of Christ in the depths. And it says that whatever depths you are in, Christ is there in the depths with you, reaching up to welcome you, to embrace you, to let you know his presence with you in that place. If you are in the lowest lows, Christ is lower still. He has been there. He has walked this. He has been through every trial. And what does he do? He continues to turn back to God in trust. And God uses that trial for maturity. We see in Jesus the wholeness of humanity. We see in his suffering our salvation, our rescue. And so as you are in your place of suffering, you can remember Jesus in the depth with you. He is there for you to call on. He's there for you to trust. He's there for you to turn to for wisdom. Let's pray. There's a certain joy, Jesus, in